in focus discussion tonight on homelessness in southern Utah. Salt Lake County is usually the place that comes to mind first when it comes to the state's homeless crisis. But the issue impacts communities in other parts of Utah too, such as rural areas and towns that rely on tourism. Tonight we explore the needs of people experiencing homelessness in these areas and what's being done to help get them back on their feet. So to start it all off, joining us first, Derek Morton, the owner and principal broker at Netgain Property Management in Cedar City. Derek, thank you for making the drive up to Salt Lake to be with us here tonight.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you. Well, first off, let's start, Derek. Tell us about how you started working with people impacted by homelessness and domestic violence.
Well, when I started Netgain Property Management about 5 years ago, I was serving on the board of the Iron County Care and Share, and of course, when I was in property management, one of the hurdles that everyone has coming out of homelessness is finding housing, and property managers or owners that are willing to rent to them. And so we kind of went on a search trying to figure out if there's a way to do it, and then trying to find a willing investor. And conveniently, about 6 months later, we found a willing investor that took the first shot at it, and we've kind of been making it up as we go and learning how to do it. And we do 30 room rentals for those coming out of domestic violence and homelessness.
Incredible. Okay, we're going to get more into this. So your company, Netgain Property Management, partners with Iron County Care and Share as well as Canyon Creek Services, who we're going to be speaking to later in the show. But what are some things your team has done to help improve the transitional housing and the survivors of domestic violence then? Well,
one, I mean, obviously providing them housing is the most important, getting them out of shelter. The two, what we try to do to the best of our ability is realize, you know, your landlord's not your enemy sometimes. That's a different way to look at it, and that we want to work with you, and we're an additional resource to help you be able to move out and build yourself back up out of poverty to be kind of back into productivity.
Yeah, such an important message. It's not your enemy. You can work together for a better ending to it. So I understand you just hired a housing advocate at Netgain. So what led to that decision?
I manage 350 units. Ooh. That gives me about 1,000 tenants and 200 owners and 4 employees that I'll try to manage. So her role is to manage the transitional housing, but then in our regular tenant housing, we were finding more and more tenants struggling, knowing what resources are available. And so not only rent resources, but because that's the easiest thing to solve, but other additional resources, whether it's mental health, right, job hunting, whatever that tenant may need to help them maintain stable housing, because that's a huge issue to us landlords that I learned on how important that housing and having that roof over your head, and the minute you take that away or threaten to take it away from someone, whether deserved or not, like it really throws them for a loop. And so we've kind of taken a stand to say we're going to do everything we possibly can to make sure our tenants are able to maintain stable housing and find the resources they need.
What an incredible service. We want to show a picture of her, by the way, and tell us her name. We have a photo that you sent in.
She's going to be loving this.
Yeah, she should.
It's Shauna Manchester. She came from the staffing industry, so she knew the population really well, which was exciting to bring her on board. And she's pretty much like me, personality. We're pretty straight up with people and just call it as we see it.
Wow, powerful duo then, especially with this cause. So what's the progress that you've seen in the community when it comes to these issues, and what are improvements that you'd like to see moving forward?
So the most important thing is at least now there's conversation. You know, at the highest levels, at least within our city and county, people acknowledge that poverty and domestic violence and homelessness is an issue. It's been hidden for a long time, but all the symptoms are starting to come up to the surface. The one thing that has to happen, though, is with anything, and I've learned this working with our tenants that are coming out of addiction, is when you're looking to make a change, you have to ask the question and go deep down and go, what am I willing to do and change to solve this problem with myself? And that's where we're lacking, and where the next step needs to go is where we have those conversations going. If this is important to us and we know this is a major issue, what are we willing to do? What are we willing to sacrifice to make this happen?
Wow, some important questions. Interesting questions to ask yourself, too. Derek, how do you think people in the community can contribute to those experiencing homelessness?
I think one is just be willing to talk to them. It's been fascinating as I get to visit with them and understanding their stories. My kids are comfortable in the homeless shelters. We go visit and talk to tenants and hear their story. We can find people that'll fit the stereotype, you know, for whatever, and we tend to focus on those. But there's much more people out there that don't fit the stereotype. That sometimes life just kicks them when they're down, and they don't know where to go, and they don't know how to build themselves up, and so they're in that situation.
So grateful for people like you who can really bring the person back to it rather than looking at this all-over issue. You're saying these are individuals who have their own unique stories and need their own unique set of tools to be able to get out of this. You really are personalizing this for so many of us. And I do think that in southern Utah, you're right, we lots of times think of Salt Lake City is the issue where the homelessness may be an issue, but you forget that this really does impact so many places across the state. An important message I'm really appreciating here tonight. So what would you say is your message to those experiencing homelessness or domestic violence who feel like they have nowhere or anyone to turn to?
The hardest part, and the thing that will surprise a lot of people, is the level of humility and courage it takes for someone to check themselves into a homeless shelter or a domestic violence shelter. And so it takes a lot of effort to get to that point. And so for those that are in that situation that aren't quite ready, know it's okay, and that when the time's right, you have people that have your back and will help you.
Yes. So powerfully said. Derek, thank you for being an example for all of us of how you really can step in and there is a need and a way to help. You have been hearing from, for those at home, Derek Morton, the owner and principal broker of Netgain Property Management in Cedar City, someone who cares as you have just felt. Thanks again for being here tonight, Derek. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up next.